Hey, what's going on, APUSH peeps? We have video number 34 for you today. This one is on the Civil War. Before we begin, I want to give a shout out to Coach Mayer's class in Georgia. Best of luck this year. Thanks for the support. You will do awesome. All right, so let's talk about causes of the war. And this is your historical context or background info on the war. Long-term issues included the expansion of slavery, especially into the Mexican Cession, and then into territories north of that 3630 line in the Louisiana Territory, such as Kansas and Nebraska. The publication of Uncle Tom's Cabin in the early 1850s was a huge turning point as it made many people in the North become abolitionists, and popular sovereignty, the ability for people to vote on the issue of slavery, led to violence in many areas, especially in Kansas. Short-term causes included the election of 1860, in which President Abraham Lincoln was elected, and he sought to keep slavery from expanding. I can't stress this enough. The Free Soil platform was to keep slavery from expanding. He did not come into office saying he was going to ban slavery. Rather, he wanted to keep it from expanding. So the beginning of the war. On April 12, 1861, there was an attack on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. This marks the beginning of the Civil War. Both the North, or the Union, and the South, or the Confederacy, will mobilize their economies and societies to fight in this war. They both will institute conscription, which is a fancy word for a draft. This was instituted in both regions, and individuals would be able to get out of the draft by paying money for a replacement or somebody else to serve for you. So opposition is going to persist to the war in both regions. In the North, we see Maryland newspapers that were shut down by Lincoln that were critical of his administration. In New York City, we see draft riots over the issue of the draft, and this war was nicknamed a rich man's war but a poor man's fight because poor people could not pay to get out of fighting. And in the South, many farmers refused to fight, and they would not let their slaves fight too. All right, let's talk about the importance of border states. First of all, you need to know what they were. These were slave states that did not secede during the Civil War. So all this dark blue area, these are your free states. The red is the slave states. And then this light blue area, this is going to be your border states. And they consisted of Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, Delaware, and West Virginia. So although they had slaves, they did not secede during the Civil War. And their siding with the Union was a major factor in the outcome of the war. Supposedly, Abe Lincoln said, I don't know if God is on my side, but Kentucky better be. That's how important these border states were during the war. So let's talk about Lincoln's goals. Early on in the beginning, the war was fought to preserve the Union. It was not to end slavery. His goal was to preserve the Union. Make sure you understand that. In September 22nd, 1862, he issues the Emancipation Proclamation, in which he declared that all slaves in areas of rebellion would be free. Everybody circle, star, underline, highlight the word rebellion. This did not apply to slave states that were not in rebellion. So those border states, slaves would not be free in those border states, only in areas that broke away and were in rebellion. And this helped change the purpose of the war. He's beginning to shift the purpose of the war from preserving the Union to ending slavery, which we'll see in a little bit. And this kept European countries from supporting the Confederacy because slavery was banned in Europe, and Europeans would not support the Confederacy over the issue of slavery. So the Emancipation Proclamation was a huge turning point in the war. Many African Americans also enlisted in the Union Army, especially escaped slaves from the South. However, they fought in segregated units and were paid less than whites. So let's jump over to the Gettysburg Address. This was issued in 1863, and you can see President Lincoln pictured here just before he gave his address. This helped change the Civil War goals from preserving the Union to ending slavery. He referenced in this address a new birth of freedom, and he sought to ensure that all men are truly created equal. If you're following along with the enhanced video guide, we're going to break down the Gettysburg Address in that guide. So please make sure you are following along with that. So why did the Union prevail? Why did the North beat the South? Well, they had improvements in leadership and strategy as the war went on. People like William Tecumseh Sherman and Ulysses S. Grant proved to have incredible leadership and strategy skills. The Anaconda Plan, which was a blockade of the South, was able to prevent the South from getting supplies and trading. And if you look at this picture here, It basically was a blockade that included the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico, and then areas of Texas. They had key victories such as Antietam, and this was a tie. So you may say, why was this a key victory? Well, after this is when Lincoln will issue the Emancipation Proclamation. And this was a strategic victory for the North because it helped boost morale. So even though it was just a tie, it helped the North push back the South. And then Lincoln will issue the Emancipation Proclamation. And the Gettysburg was another important victory in which Lincoln will issue the Gettysburg Address. And both of these battles cost countless lives. There were thousands of people that died in these two battles. Antietam is actually the bloodiest day in American history for the loss of American soldiers. Other reasons the Union prevailed included greater resources. They had a larger population and more factories, and the destruction of the South's infrastructure. So Sherman is going to give his famous March to the Sea, in which he will destroy the infrastructure of much of the South. You see in this picture here that railroads were being torn apart and destroyed to prevent shipments in the South. So personal liberties during the war you should be familiar with. Habeas corpus is a term which means you cannot be held in jail without charges brought against you. So you cannot just be sitting in a jail for an infinite amount of time without charges brought against you. However, Lincoln will suspend habeas corpus during the war. And this is something that only Congress can do, not the president. Ex parte Merryman in 1861, Roger B. Taney and the Supreme Court will state that President Lincoln could not suspend habeas corpus, and Lincoln will ignore this decision. African Americans played an important role in the Civil War, and beginning in 1862, after the Emancipation Proclamation, African Americans could enlist in the war. There was a famous 54th Regiment in which African Americans fought in the war, and if you've ever seen the movie Glory, it is based on this regiment. They did, however, fight in segregated units and often did manual labor and were paid less than their white counterparts. Women during the war played an important role as well. Employment opportunities will increase for women. They could work as teachers, work in factories, and work as nurses. There was the National Women's Loyal League, which was founded by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, and they hoped to abolish slavery and gain female suffrage. We'll talk a lot about this issue of female suffrage in the next video, Reconstruction. Clara Barton was a famous woman that helped distribute medical supplies during the war and later founded the Red Cross. All right, we'll end with a quick recap. We have long-term and short-term causes of the war. Be able to identify and explain those for a short answer question or an essay. Mobilization of economies by both the North and the South. There was opposition to the war in the North and the South. The importance of border states, can't stress enough how important of a role they played. Lincoln's evolving purpose of the war, from preserving the Union to abolishing slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation and Gettysburg Address could be great stimulus excerpts for a multiple choice question or a short answer. Be familiar with reasons for the Union victory. Personal liberties during the war will decrease. African Americans in their role during the war, as well as women. All right, guys, look forward to seeing you back here for video number 35, Reconstruction, a very, very important time in American history. Thanks for watching. Best of luck this year, and have a good day.